Following is the installation procedure for the Digital Thermalert Service Kit. The parts and supplies needed are listed here. The tools needed are listed here. You may also reference the T001-15 Digital Thermalert Service Kit Install PDF for the printed version. Note: if one or more DTA sensors need to be replaced, you will need to capture and program all sensors on the trailer using the instructions at the end of this manual. Review sensor data for the trailer. If the data seems inaccurate, the DTA sensor will need to be serviced. If a new sensor is needed, make sure to capture the 6-digit sensor ID code before or during the installation process. For sensors that do not need replacement, make sure to capture the 6-digit sensor ID code on your user interface or at the wheel end locations. Trailers are configured as single-axle and dual-axle applications. DTA sensor positions will be as follows on the tire view programming display. Warning: the system must be turned off and depressurized before performing any service or maintenance. Personal injury and damage to components can occur. Turn the system on and off valve to the off position. Bleed any residual air from the trailer air tank. Remove tire hoses from through T by hand, using the knurled fitting. Note: do not remove tire hoses from valve stems. Remove through T by unscrewing counterclockwise by hand. Note: use care not to damage through T during and after removal. Place drain pan with catch pad on wheel to allow lubricant to drain. Remove hubcap. Note: cover and protect wheel end from debris with a clean cloth or towel. Remove stator from press plug using 5/8 socket and ratchet wrench. Note: use care not to damage filter on end of stator during and after removal. Set aside parts that will be reused on a clean cloth or towel. Hubcap and bolts, stator and through T. Thread press plug removal tool into press plug as far as possible. Thread slide hammer tool into press plug removal tool as far as possible. Remove press plug using slide hammer. Note: leave the sensor wire attached to the press plug at this point. You may use this to fish the new sensor wire through the spindle end in next steps. For wired 12-volt DTA sensor, disconnect sensor from harness at weather pack connector and release sensor pigtail from any zip ties or other securing methods. Note: when cutting zip ties, take caution not to damage DTA 12-volt power wires. For wired 12-volt sensor, disconnect sensor from harness at weather pack connector and release sensor pigtail from any zip ties or other securing methods. Remove sensor using 14 mm open end wrench or 14 mm crowfoot wrench. Clean residual sealant from 1/4 NPT sensor hole in axle before installing new sensor. Cut the existing sensor wire within 2 inches of the sensor to enable use as a fish line for the new sensor. Note: do not let wire fall into axle. Existing sensor wire can be used to fish new sensor wire through axle. On new DTA sensor, uncoil thermocouple wire and straighten, ensuring there are no kinks. Insert old sensor thermocouple wire into the eyelet on the new sensor and secure with tape. Gently feed or pull wire back through axle to wheel end. Set aside the removed sensor, wire, and press plug. Note: for warranty purposes, you will need to return the sensor and press plug with wire attached to P.S.I. Make sure to reference the RMA number issued when the replacement parts were supplied. Apply thread sealant or tape to new sensor. Screw sensor into axle, making sure thermocouple wire and weather pack connector wire for 12-volt wired version move freely and do not bind or kink. Note: make sure to capture the 6-digit sensor ID code for programming to the system after the installation. Torque sensor to 23 to 28 feet-pounds with 14 mm crowfoot wrench. Plug sensor into harness using weather pack connector. Secure sensor wire lead to axle and existing harness using zip ties as shown. Note: do not overstress wire lead. Ensure zip ties only contact the sheathing and do not contact the wires. Remove fish line from new DT sensor wire eyelet. Tuck thermalert wire slightly into spindle hole to allow cleaning of spindle bore. Clean residual retaining compound from spindle bore using drill with wire brush or sandpaper. Note: cover and protect wheel end from debris with a clean cloth or towel. Wipe spindle bore with towel and feel inside with finger for any leftover residue. Further clean spindle bore using alcohol wipe supplied with digital thermalert kit. Install ring terminal on thermocouple wire to press plug using the button head cap screw. Note: make sure that the flattest side of the ring terminal is placed flush against the press plug face. Apply a drop of thread locker to the threads of the button head cap screw. Torque cap screw to 28 to 34 inch-pounds with wire oriented to avoid interference with stator when installed. Note: wire oriented to avoid interference with stator when installed. Wipe off any excess thread lock material. After installed, bend ring terminal up 90 degrees to plug face to run parallel to, but not against the stator when installed. Apply only the approved retaining compound included in the installation kit evenly to the outside diameter of the axle press plug. Insert the axle press plug straight into the spindle bore by hand until the plug stops in the bore, ensuring cap screw is oriented in the 12 o'clock position. Note: as you work to get the press plug engaged into the end of the axle, it's very important to feed the thermocouple wire back into the axle to avoid the wire being pinched during press plug installation. Use a 4-pound brass or synthetic mallet to drive the axle press plug into the spindle bore until the drive adapter bottoms out squarely on the end of the spindle. The drive adapter sets the axle press plug installation depth behind the lead and chamfer. There will be a definite change in the sound and feel of the hammering when the drive adapter bottoms out. Wipe off all retaining compound residue from the spindle and axle press plug drive adapter. The tire inflation system can be pressurized 30 minutes after installation of the axle press plug. Clean existing stator threads and apply thread sealant or tape to the stator threads. Hand tighten the stator into the spindle hole. Use a 5/8-inch socket to tighten the stator approximately 2 1/2 additional turns, or 23 to 28 pounds-feet, to obtain an airtight seal. Remove and clean old gasket material from hub face, ensuring no debris enters the bearing areas. Clean the existing hub cap flange area. Remove shop towel or rag from hub cavity and install the existing hubcap and bolts using a new hubcap gasket. Ensure hubcap is oriented with the oil fill cap in the up position. Torque hubcap bolts in a star pattern to 12 to 16 pounds-feet. Clean through T to hubcap surface area. Clean the through T rubber flapper area. Carefully install the through T assembly straight into the hubcap to insert the tube into the stator. When you insert the tube into the stator, It's normal to feel some resistance when the tube contacts the stator seal. Hand tighten the through T assembly. Tighten the T with the through T socket tool using a torque wrench set at 45 pound-inches. Check alignment of the T air fittings to the tire valve stems. If not aligned, continue tightening the through T with a torque wrench set to 55 pound-inches until aligned. Do not exceed 55 pound-inches. Reinstall and hand tighten the tire hoses to the through Ts. Do not use pliers. Close the maintenance drain valve on the MTIS control box. Turn the system on and off valve to the on position. Note: after all components are installed per Section 3, check system operation in the Meritor 14P maintenance manual. Check for air leaks as well as where sensor is threaded into the axle as part of axle pressure test. Apply power to trailer. Trailers are configured as single axle and dual axle applications. Digital thermal alert sensor positions will be as follows on the tire view programming display. Note: for complete programming instructions and sensor position configuration, refer to T001-15 installation manual that accompanies this project. Apply magnet onto side of digital thermal alert sensor to enable signal pairing protocol to programming display. Turn on the tire view display. The on and off button is on the right side of the display. Press and hold set until it beeps. Display is now in programming mode. The words high pressure set will appear at the bottom of the screen. Press plus to scroll through the parameters until Learn ID appears. Press and release set. The first sensor position on the display will blink. Press plus to move to the desired sensor position based on the sensor configuration diagram. Press and release set again, and FFF will blink. Hold the display near the sensor for that wheel end position near the bottom left side of the display. Press and release go. IDLF will appear on the screen, then the 6-digit sensor ID code will flash. Press and release set to save the code to that tire position. When coded correctly, the 6-digit unique ID code will be displayed. Make sure this ID corresponds to the sensor you are programming. Note: it is possible to pick up an incorrect sensor ID if display is close to other sensors. Verify sensor ID on screen matches sensor being paired. Use plus to move to the next wheel end position to be programmed. Move magnet to the corresponding digital thermal alert sensor. Repeat previous steps until all sensors have been programmed. When complete, press and release back twice to return to the main screen. The sensors will begin reading 115 P.S.I. and show latest temperature reading. This is part of the normal setup process. Remove magnet from digital thermal alert sensor prior to completing next steps. Note: all sensor ID and alert parameters will be overwritten during this process. Please be sure all sensor ID and alert parameters have been programmed to the display before proceeding. On the display, press and hold Go until screen reads Accept. Use plus to move to the screen that has both tractor and trailer with the word Send. Locate the TireView Live receiver on the trailer. On the receiver, press the center button 5 times quickly. Note: the receiver should beep and the button should begin flashing rapidly. If this does not happen, try pressing the button 5 times quickly again. Once the receiver beeps and the button begins flashing rapidly, it is ready to receive the sensor IDs from display. On the display, with screen that shows both tractor and trailer with the word Send, press and release set. Hold display next to receiver. Sensor ID and alert parameters should push from the display to the receiver. If the process is successful for both receiver and display, you will hear one long beep. If the process failed, you will hear 2 short beeps. In this case, return to previous receiver instructions and repeat the process. Digital thermal alert sensor installation and programming should be complete. Please contact P.S.I. for technical support at the email or phone number shown.